Global warming has taken much of our attention, as it should. 4 to 5 British Columbians believe reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the effects of global warming should be the government's top priority. So how did the provincial government here in BC react to these concerns? They introduced a carbon tax, which has garnered a lot of attention and caused much controversy. The aim of this documentary is to explore the carbon tax, its environmental communication, and the effects on the existing public sphere here in BC.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce Bill 37, the Carbon Tax Act 2008. Mr. Speaker, Bill 37 introduces a groundbreaking, revenue-neutral carbon tax that will encourage all British Columbian families and businesses to lower their carbon footprint and will help meet our goal of reducing emissions by 33% by 2020.
The carbon tax that now applies in British Columbia is applicable to all fossil fuels that are burned in the province of British Columbia.
Up until July 1st, we had been treating the atmosphere as a free dumping ground for all of our greenhouse gas emissions.
The point, in my opinion, is to bring awareness to people that we now have to be responsible.
The carbon tax is one of the most effective means of putting a price on carbon.
This is a totally unique idea. I don't think any government in the world has ever done anything like this.
You have to get a value on the atmosphere in order. You have to either use a carbon tax or a regulation of some kind in order to get greenhouse gas emissions to fall over the next few decades so that people and businesses make different technology choices. And the British Columbia's government's policies are leading in the world in this regard.
What I like about the BC plan, not only the carbon tax, which, by the way, that is a bold move because there is no other jurisdiction in North America that is doing it quite the way that BC is doing it. I mean that in a very positive sense. I think it's a world leader in trying to go about doing this in a comprehensive way. But what I like about the BC approach is that it is so all-encompassing. It's actually looking at trying to pull a number of different pieces together. So it's not just one solution, it's a comprehensive solution.
Without a question, the single most important component of the BC plan is the carbon tax. It's not so much the small increment that's been done in today and will increase in the next couple of years. It's the price signal that's being sent to the marketplace and making it revenue neutral. This internationally is really showing leadership. It's being watched all over the world.
Actually, BC is ahead of other provincial provinces and seems to get it. So that in fact they're bringing forward a series of regulations over time and enhancing them and putting them into the budget so that in fact they have solid teeth.
When I look at policies around the world, and that's my area of expertise, climate policy, and I see what the British Columbia government has done, this makes us here in British Columbia leaders in the world in climate policy, and I'm very excited about that.
Big failing in terms of this bill is that those who pollute the most are getting a free ride.
And there is a lack of consistency in the policy program of this government between its talk on climate change and, in fact, its actions in a whole range of other policy areas.
On the one hand, we see the government trying to show in some superficial way that they are going to try and address climate change on the backs of consumers with an unfair gas tax. And on the other hand, we don't see any kind of incentives being put in place to actually create options for people.
We cannot support the disconnected nature of how this government grapples with this issue, arguably looking more like it wants to greenwash itself through next May than deal with this serious question.
Our modern market economy has produced a grand variety of elaborate and questionable efforts to appear environmentally responsible. Many NGOs are often accused of greenwashing their public image through insincere initiatives to address environmental issues. When properly analyzed, these organizations often exhibit important inconsistencies and contradictions with regard to their environmental responsibility. Is it possible that these questionable marketing ploys can extend beyond the free market and be employed by actual governments? Many critics argue that this most certainly can be the case. So is it right to characterize the BC carbon tax as greenwashing?
If you look at the reality, what they have done, they have, BC government has left the big polluters out the big industrial polluters, oil and gas companies, the cement manufacturers, those kind of big industries, they're the one who create about 30% of the pollution, and they're left out of this carbon tax. The government has also given approximately $340 million to the oil and gas companies as subsidies. So it's a contradiction in itself. On one hand, we are saying that we should be sending the message that we want this carbon tax so people will get out of their cars, so they will use less vehicles, and then at the same time the big polluters, the oil and gas companies and cement manufacturers, they're given subsidies and they're left out of this whole occasion. Why they have given hundreds of millions of dollars to big polluters? Where's the neutrality? There is no neutrality. People have seen that it was just a trick to collect more taxes, therefore they're not buying into it.
I think the NDP makes a good point in that the provincial government continues to back a number of measures that are, to say the least, counterproductive when it comes to emission reductions. So, for instance, the lifting of the moratorium on offshore oil and gas drilling, the providing of large subsidies for oil and gas exploration, the drive to twin the Port Mann Bridge and expand Highway 1. All of these things are very significant projects that are going to drive emission increases.
Well, I think there's no question that British Columbians, in fact, were way ahead of Gordon Campbell when it came to wanting to do something for the environment. Gordon Campbell was fighting the Kyoto Accord 4 years ago, and British Columbians were saying, we want to get on with doing our part on climate change. So the people of this province were well ahead of the Premier. But they see through what he's doing. They see it as simply a gas tax, that the Premier wanted to do something that would give him some green credentials instead of really caring about the environment. This is the Premier who eliminated the Minister of the Environment when he first got in 2002, who has continued to look at logging practices that don't support the environment, that harm watersheds, hand over our forest land to forest companies with no regard for the environmental impact, continue pushing offshore oil and gas drilling, doing nothing about fish farms and protecting our wild stock. So I think the public knows better. They see that this is simply a gas tax.
Well, until now, Gordon Campbell and his caucus have been against the Kyoto Agreement. And certainly one day, I think he had a dream, as he does most of the time. And, he or somebody talked to him, suddenly there's we are the green guys, we have to do it. And they're not sincere about it. And if you look at their past, their record, you can only find out. And, the other example is that on one hand they are saying that we should be environmentally friendly, we should do everything to protect our environment. Then they are saying it's okay to have offshore drilling. It's a huge contradiction. We have seen time after time, offshore drilling has caused more damage to our environment, especially in the Queen Charlotte Island area where they're hoping to have these big drills looking for oil. We would have more tankers going around our shores. Accidents have happened and could happen. So what are we talking about? Total contradiction.
So what we have here is we have a government that has a number of significant inconsistencies with a platform that was all about emission reductions.
The government is doing everything to discourage people not to use public transit. At the same time, they're saying they're more green, they would like to have people using public transit. How would they do it?
It is infuriating, I think, to many people around the province of BC that this has been constructed in secret and that they have had no voice.
This government has chosen to evoke a closure bill on much of the legislation and has not given us our opportunity for full and fair democratic debate on this.
The Premier said he doesn't want legislators talking to British Columbians about climate change. He doesn't want legislators talking in an open and transparent way.
We have seen that the government's inclination and the direction of the Premier is to develop policy in secret and then spring it on the public.
Investigating the process of forming and passing important environmental legislation can serve to illuminate the democratic legitimacy of policies such as the carbon tax. Comprehensive dialogue and deliberation between all stakeholders are regarded as prerequisites for environmental justice and sound government policy representing the public's interest. Many questions have been raised about the process that brought the carbon tax into law. Exploring the answers to these questions of democratic policymaking will help us further understand the public sphere behind the carbon tax.
Our government took leadership. Let's do something about it. Let's stop talking. Let's stop all this studying and discussions and discussion groups and task forces, and let's get down to doing business. Let's do something about it. And that is our way of doing business, of running governments.
Well, I think it's part of why you're seeing the real backlash to the government's gas tax is that, to good public policy is developed with the public. That's a real key. If you're going to develop good public policy, you have to include the public in the discussion. The government developed their gas tax in secret. They didn't talk to people about it. They didn't tell people what they were going to do. They didn't discuss the impacts of it with people. They just came out with it on budget day. And so when you develop something in secret, you don't know the impacts it'll have on communities. You haven't heard the issues ahead of time. You aren't able to address them. And that just makes for bad public policy. And that's really what you're seeing with this gas tax, is that a government went off, developed something, didn't talk to the people who would be impacted, and now there's a reaction. Well, they should have known to expect that. You don't develop things in secret. You don't develop good public policy without including the public who are impacted. So, that's what I've been doing for the last 2 months, is traveling around British Columbia, talking with people about the impacts of this gas tax. I've met with the Cattlemen's Association, the Fruit Growers Association, taxi drivers, school boards, municipalities. All of those people are going to be impacted by this gas tax, but nobody came to talk to them. Nobody asked them what the impact would be. So I think it's a good example that someone will do a study of someday on how not to develop public policy, which is to do it behind closed doors in secret and then say to people, don't worry, it's good for you. And by the way, we're going to use all your tax dollars advertising to convince you that it's good for you. People see through that. They're smarter than that.
Whenever government introduces a new tax or announce a new tax, you can't go, it's very difficult without finance ministers being forced to resign for them to go out and talk about a tax before it is announced. It's sort of one of the, it's not, I was going to say unwritten rules, it's actually one of the written rules for finance ministers, is that you cannot get to sort of engage in a broad public discussion about whether, what taxes are going up or coming down. But if you look, for example, at the Climate Action Plan document, that in that document, in one of the appendices, we list all of the organizations in British Columbia that were consulted on the Climate Action Plan. And it fills, I think, I forgot how many pages, but there's hundreds of organizations that were consulted. It's one of the challenges of government is you can't go out and consult individually with 4.3 million British Columbians, but you can certainly engage in public discussion through organizations, and we did exactly that.
The government has not done a great deal of stakeholder consultation in this process. On the other hand, the risk of stakeholder consultation is that you come up with a political solution to an environmental problem. The global climate doesn't care what people's appetite for change or emission reductions. We have to reduce our emissions by at least 80% from 1990 levels by 2050, or we have a level of dangerous climate change that we don't want to contemplate. It would be nice, it would be good to have consultations with the public on how you get to that target. What I'm leery of would be conversations about what the target should be, because that may not get us to where we need to go.
We have been talking to literally hundreds and thousands of people across BC. We have had rallies against this gas tax. It's not even a carbon tax, people call it gas tax.
Right.
And people are telling us the feedback we get. People say, no, this is not a very fair way to do it. It was secret, secretly done. It wasn't a fair process. So therefore, they're saying this is not the way it should have been done.
talk about it. About what it will mean, who it will affect, and why it's time to address it. This is our province, and this is what British Columbia is doing to make a positive difference. A 33% reduction on greenhouse gases by 2020. New investments in clean energy, emissions reductions, flood prevention, and forest health. New incentives to reduce waste and save on fuel, heating, and energy. To learn more about how you can save money and reduce global warming, check out livesmartbc.ca.
Despite the fact that there are a lot of non-communication issues that can discourage people from this policy, what were some of the problems promoting this tax, and where can the lines of communication improve in the future?
If they were really sincerely wanted to have their plan, a successful plan, they would have first come up with facts and figures. How much money we need more to buy more buses, to have more SkyTrain lines and that kind of thing. What plan they would have to have workers going to their workplace in industrial areas. So none of that exists. We don't have that. So obviously they have failed. Like they have to be honest, they have to be sincere, they have to be transparent, they have to let people know what exactly it means, what their plan is. Carbon tax is, like a very fancy word. Everybody, wants to be part of it. Yeah. We all want to do it. Carbon tax, environment, surely people understand that. Yeah. But how you do it, you can't fool people just by gimmicks, by fancy words.
What, where the communication has been lacking, the connection between the carbon tax and the resulting reductions in income tax and the tax credit program. That people are still, I think the public is very much aware of the fact that they are now paying carbon tax, but they are not aware of the fact that there are offsetting reductions in income tax, as well as the tax credit programs for low income tax.
Well, it's certainly going the wrong way. The government has claimed that it would be revenue neutral. I don't believe it is. Mm-hmm. First of all, if it was revenue neutral, if it was that attractive, the public hasn't bought into it. Now, in order to take the government's message to the public, the government is spending millions of dollars on advertisements, on radio ads, newspaper ads and all that. And people still are not accepting that.
A waste of money, a waste of taxpayers' money. Nice ads. I mean, the ad company did a great job of putting together those ads. They're beautiful ads. But they don't tell the truth. They don't tell the real issues around the big polluters being left out. They don't tell the truth about the government not investing in transit when they could invest in those choices for British Columbians. So, when government has to use all of our tax dollars to be able to advertise, to convince us something's good for us, people know to beware. They're beware. They're worried about this gas tax.
So one of the challenges we have as government is to making sure that the public understands what is the motive behind this. It is not a tax grab. It is not for the government to collect revenue. And that is critical, people to understand that. So I think perhaps it is a lack of proper communication on our part. So we need to do a little better job in making sure that public understands why we have done what we have done.
Yeah, I think there's certainly lots of room for more public understanding of climate change and how it affects people. Like I think that today, there's a certain percentage of the population that are very concerned about climate change. And I think there's this smaller percentage of the population that recognize that climate change has had a profound impact on our own province. Like people, when they think about climate change, they might think about the melting ice caps and hurricanes in the Caribbean, but they don't think about what's happening in our own backyard with things like the mountain pine beetle infestation, the floods that we have seen, the changes we've seen in our own weather right here in British Columbia as a direct consequence of climate change, that a lot of people don't make that connection. And then I think there's even a smaller percentage of the population that recognize that there's things that they personally can do to be part of the solution.
Liberals like John Narane tell us that this tax is an incentive to get British Columbians out of their cars and use other means of transportation. Sure, there's mass transit, co-op cars, and even bikes. But are these alternatives enough? Or are they a quick and easy scapegoat again to put the onus on the individual?
Well, in order to get people out of their cars, you have to have real alternative available for them. That option is still not there. What we have been saying that the government should be investing more money in public transit. We should have more buses, more bus routes going into where people have to go to work. For example, if you're working in an industrial area, there's no bus service there. There's no SkyTrain. How would you leave your car behind? In Surrey alone, the Surrey City Council has asked for hundreds and hundreds of buses. Under the BC Liberal government plan, they would get maximum of 80 buses. We have to increase the number of SkyTrain cars going back and forth all the time. Secondly, to make sure the public feels safe to use SkyTrain stations. And we have now started a 10-point plan proposed by the New Democratic Party. And that plan asks for more security in and around the SkyTrain stations so people can use more. Those are the basic things that the government must take care immediately to encourage people to use public transit.
Well, I think one of the first keys, and we've been fighting the government on this, we've had a petition going, is to make sure that transit stays affordable. I think that's really important, because if you're going to get people to use transit, you have to make it affordable and you have to make it accessible. So expand the hours that transit's available, add more buses. We could do that right away. Surrey has said they're 500 buses short, so you could put those on the road right now and start giving people alternatives. I think we need to make transit available to people by giving free passes. Get people on transit so they see the opportunity to be able to try it. Alternative fuels, I think sustainable alternative fuels. Unlike the government, we don't believe in moving to ethanol where you actually get rid of agriculture land. That kind of defeats the purpose of doing something on behalf of the environment. But there are sustainable biofuels that can be looked at. That is another area that government needs to explore. But there's so much that can be done just in the area of transit alone. Huge investments in transit will provide great opportunities for people who really want to make a difference, who really want to get out of their cars, but don't have the choices because it's not there in their community.
So government has now established a comprehensive strategy. It is not just the carbon tax. There is a strategy of infrastructure and building of infrastructure. There is $14 billion will be invested in the next few years in building highways, in building bridges, in putting extra buses on the road, and building SkyTrain. So this is a comprehensive strategy, in my opinion. The twinning of the Portman Bridge. For the first time in 20 years, there will be a bus lane on this bridge, so that the buses can now communicate and transport people from the valley into the lower mainland, into the city. The extension of the SkyTrain lines, right, going the Evergreen line that will go to the Tri-Cities, to Coquitlam, again bringing people in on public transportation. And then the connections from the SkyTrain by buses to your destination. So this is a more integrated transport system that will also be implemented when this program unfolds.
So why is it that a province full of citizens concerned for their environment and want to see change cringe when the idea of a carbon tax is introduced? Maybe it's the lines of communication, not only with the tax itself, but with the real environmental challenge at hand, which is that of global warming. There's this tendency for North Americans to discount the threat of global warming. Many see it as an environmental problem with consequences that are perceived to be far off into the future. Other survey trends show that only about 1/3 of the public believe that global warming will pose a threat within their lifetime. So if the lines of communication started there, then maybe more citizens would be applauding rather than booing. Or is it the fact that this tax was communicated behind closed doors? This tax was sprung upon us with no warning. Maybe if we see these new methods of communication put into place, then we might see a change in the polls. Or is it the fact that the way this tax has been communicated has been no different than taxes in the past? This kind of greenwashing that has gone on. Government tells you what they want you to know, but leave out stuff they don't want you to know. People find this out and then do not know what to believe. This kind of communication cannot be trusted. Whatever it is, it hasn't worked. If their future transit plans become a reality, then maybe people will look back and applaud this form of communication. But for now, we are left with a lot of citizens hot at the pumps and global warming getting even hotter. In our project here, so we appreciate you taking the time out. I know you're busy, and so we really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Okay, thanks for Sanson. Okay, bye. Hey, shh. We're going to check out the NDP right now. Get a little interview with Carol James.
Leader.
This is what we've been waiting for. Leader of the NDP. Come on with me. Okay, we're coming up to see David Suzuki, or the foundation. So we're just going to check it out here. Here it is, 219. Let's head on upstairs.
Hi there. My name is Nicholas Heap. I'm an energy and climate policy analyst with the David Suzuki Foundation in Vancouver. A flexible response to that. Let me. Can I answer that one again? I just want to.